Caiaphas has a very big and usually very negative role as a man who masterminded Jesus' death.
In the dusty streets of ancient Jerusalem, a powerful figure emerged, one whose actions would echo through the ages. His name was Joseph Caiaphas.
Protecting his own power and preserving public order were now his highest priorities.
And he would become one of the most infamous high priests in Jewish history. But who was this man, and how did he rise to such a position of influence?
The evidence suggests that we got Caiaphas all wrong. Somebody placed 2 crucifixion nails in his ossuary among his bones.
The rise of Caiaphas. Caiaphas lived during a time of great unrest in Judea, a land caught between the iron grip of Rome and the passionate faith of its Jewish inhabitants. Imagine walking through the crowded marketplaces of Jerusalem, hearing whispers of rebellion against Roman rule, and feeling the tension in the air. This was the world Caiaphas knew, a world where politics and religion were tightly woven together. Born into a priestly family, Caiaphas was no stranger to the ways of the temple. From a young age, he would have learned the intricate rituals and laws that governed Jewish religious life. But becoming high priest wasn't just about knowing the right prayers or wearing the right robes. It was about power, influence, and knowing how to play the dangerous game of politics. Caiaphas didn't become high priest overnight. He had to navigate the treacherous waters of both Jewish and Roman politics. The Romans, who controlled Judea, had the final say in who became high priest. This meant that Caiaphas had to prove himself not just to his own people, but to the foreign rulers who held ultimate power. Picture a young Caiaphas, ambitious and clever, slowly climbing the ranks of the priesthood. He would have had to make alliances, outsmart rivals, and prove his worth time and time again. It wasn't an easy path, but Caiaphas was determined to reach the top. In the year 18 CE, Caiaphas finally achieved his goal. He was appointed high priest by the Roman governor, a position he would hold for an unusually long time, 18 years. This long tenure speaks to Caiaphas's skill in maintaining favor with both the Romans and influential Jewish families. But what exactly did it mean to be high priest? As high priest, Caiaphas would have led the most important religious ceremonies, including the Day of Atonement, when he alone would enter the Holy of Holies to make atonement for the sins of the people. Yet being high priest wasn't just about religious duties. Caiaphas also held significant political power. He presided over the Sanhedrin, the Jewish court and council, making him a key decision-maker in many aspects of Jewish life. In a sense, Caiaphas was like a bridge between the Jewish people and their Roman rulers, constantly trying to balance the needs and demands of both sides. This balancing act wasn't easy. The people of Judea were growing increasingly restless under Roman rule. Many longed for a Messiah who would free them from foreign control and restore the kingdom of Israel. At the same time, the Romans were always on the lookout for signs of rebellion, ready to crush any threat to their power. Caiaphas had to navigate these dangerous waters carefully. He needed to keep the peace to satisfy the Romans, while also maintaining his authority and respect among his own people. It was a high-stakes game where one wrong move could spell disaster. But Caiaphas was a skilled player. He knew how to use his position to his advantage, forming alliances with powerful families and maintaining good relations with the Roman governors. Under his leadership, the priesthood became increasingly wealthy and influential. However, this rise to power came at a cost. Many ordinary people grew resentful of the priesthood's wealth and perceived corruption. They saw Caiaphas and his fellow priests as being more concerned with maintaining their own power than truly serving God and the people. It was into this complex and volatile situation that a new figure emerged, a charismatic preacher from Galilee named Jesus. His teachings and growing following would soon present Caiaphas with the greatest challenge of his career. As high priest, Caiaphas would have heard reports about Jesus. Perhaps at first he dismissed him as just another wandering teacher. But as Jesus' popularity grew, and as his teachings seemed to challenge the authority of the temple, Caiaphas would have become increasingly concerned. What thoughts must have run through Caiaphas's mind as he heard about Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem? How did he react to the stories of Jesus overturning the tables of the money changers in the temple, Caiaphas's own domain? We can only imagine the late-night discussions Caiaphas must have had with other religious leaders, debating what to do about this potential threat to their authority. Little did Caiaphas know that his decisions in the coming days would forever link his name with one of the most significant events in human history. As tensions rose in Jerusalem, Caiaphas found himself at a crossroads. The choices he would make in dealing with Jesus would not only shape his own legacy, but would have far-reaching consequences that would echo through the centuries. But what exactly drove Caiaphas to take action against Jesus? Was it purely a matter of protecting his own power and position? Or were there deeper religious and political motivations at play? Caiaphas confronts Jesus. As the streets of Jerusalem buzzed with excitement and tension, Caiaphas found himself facing a decision that would change the course of history. The charismatic preacher from Galilee, Jesus of Nazareth, had become more than just a minor irritation. He was now a full-blown threat to the delicate balance of power that Caiaphas had worked so hard to maintain. But what exactly was it about Jesus that worried Caiaphas so much? First and foremost, Jesus' teachings seemed to challenge the very foundations of the temple's authority. He spoke of a direct relationship with God, one that didn't necessarily require the elaborate rituals and sacrifices that were the bread and butter of the priestly class. For Caiaphas, this wasn't just a theological disagreement. It was a threat to his entire way of life and his position of power. Moreover, Jesus was attracting huge crowds. Imagine the scene: thousands of people gathering to hear him speak, hanging on his every word. To Caiaphas, this must have been deeply alarming. In a land already simmering with rebellion against Roman rule, a charismatic leader with a large following could easily spark a full-scale uprising. And that was perhaps Caiaphas's greatest fear, that Jesus' popularity would provoke a harsh Roman response. The Romans weren't known for their gentle touch when it came to squashing rebellions. If they decided to crack down, it wouldn't just be Jesus and his followers who suffered. The entire Jewish population could face severe consequences. So, as Passover approached and tensions in the city reached a fever pitch, Caiaphas knew he had to act. According to the Gospel accounts, Caiaphas played a central role in the plot to arrest Jesus. He's described as gathering with other religious leaders to discuss how to deal with the troublesome preacher. It was during one of these meetings that Caiaphas reportedly uttered the fateful words, "It is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish." These words give us a glimpse into Caiaphas's thinking. He saw the situation in stark, practical terms. In his mind, sacrificing one man, even if that man was innocent, was a small price to pay to prevent a potential catastrophe for the entire nation. So how did Caiaphas go about putting this plan into action? The Gospels tell us that he and the other leaders looked for a way to arrest Jesus quietly, away from the crowds. They found their opportunity when one of Jesus' own disciples, Judas Iscariot, offered to betray him. Picture the scene: a clandestine meeting between Judas and the religious leaders, perhaps in a dimly lit room in the temple complex. Money changing hands, plans being made in hushed voices. Caiaphas must have felt a mix of relief and apprehension. The wheels were now in motion, but would their plan succeed? The arrest itself took place at night, in the Garden of Gethsemane. Caiaphas had sent a group of armed men, guided by Judas, to seize Jesus. In the confusion and darkness, with torches flickering and weapons gleaming, Jesus was taken into custody. What happened next was a whirlwind of events that would be debated and analyzed for centuries to come. Jesus was brought before Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin for questioning. The Gospel accounts paint a picture of a tense and dramatic confrontation. Imagine the scene: Jesus standing before Caiaphas and the other religious leaders, perhaps in the high priest's own house, the air thick with tension, accusations flying back and forth. Caiaphas, in his role as high priest, would have been at the center of this impromptu trial. According to the Gospels, Caiaphas directly questioned Jesus, demanding to know if he claimed to be the Messiah, the Son of God. When Jesus' answer was deemed blasphemous, Caiaphas reportedly tore his robes, a dramatic gesture of outrage and condemnation. But Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin didn't have the authority to carry out a death sentence. For that, they needed the approval of the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. So, in the early hours of the morning, Jesus was taken to Pilate's headquarters. Here, we see another side of Caiaphas's political skill. The charge of blasphemy that so outraged the Jewish leaders wouldn't have meant much to a Roman governor. So, the accusations against Jesus were reframed in political terms. He was presented as a threat to Roman rule, someone claiming to be the king of the Jews. This strategy worked. Despite his initial reluctance, Pilate eventually gave in to the pressure and ordered Jesus' crucifixion. Caiaphas had achieved his goal. The troublesome preacher from Galilee was eliminated, and the threat of Roman retaliation had been averted, or so he thought. Little did Caiaphas know that his actions, far from ending the Jesus movement, would instead fuel its explosive growth. The crucifixion, rather than being the end of the story, was just the beginning. In the days and weeks that followed, as reports of Jesus' resurrection began to circulate, and his followers became increasingly bold in spreading his message, Caiaphas must have realized that his problems were far from over. But what were the immediate consequences of Caiaphas's actions? How did the events of that fateful Passover affect his position as high priest and his relationship with both the Jewish people and the Roman authorities? The aftermath. In the wake of Jesus' crucifixion, Caiaphas might have expected things to return to normal. After all, he had successfully eliminated what he saw as a major threat to the stability of Judea. But as the dust settled on that fateful Passover, Caiaphas soon realized that his troubles were far from over. The city was abuzz with rumors and whispers. Stories of Jesus' resurrection were spreading like wildfire, and his followers, rather than dispersing as Caiaphas might have hoped, seemed to be growing in number and boldness. For Caiaphas, this must have been deeply unsettling. He had gambled everything on the idea that executing Jesus would put an end to the movement. Instead, it seemed to have given it new life. How could this be? The book of Acts tells us that the early Christian community in Jerusalem grew rapidly in the aftermath of Jesus' death. They preached openly in the temple courts, the very heart of Caiaphas's domain. This was a direct threat to Caiaphas's authority, but Caiaphas wasn't one to sit idly by. The book of Acts describes how he and other religious leaders tried to suppress the early Christian movement. They arrested apostles, threatened them, even had them flogged. Yet nothing seemed to work. The more they tried to stamp out the movement, the more it grew. This must have been incredibly frustrating for Caiaphas. He was used to being in control, to having his orders obeyed. Now, he was faced with a group of seemingly ordinary people who refused to be silenced no matter what he did. But it wasn't just the growth of the Christian movement that was causing problems for Caiaphas. His actions during Jesus' trial and crucifixion had likely damaged his reputation among many of the Jewish people. Think about it. Passover was supposed to be a time of celebration and unity for the Jewish people. Instead, Caiaphas had turned it into a time of violence and division. Many people, even if they weren't followers of Jesus, might have been uncomfortable with the way the whole situation was handled. Moreover, Caiaphas's close cooperation with the Romans in executing Jesus might have been seen by some as a betrayal of Jewish interests. In a time when many Jews were hoping for liberation from Roman rule, Caiaphas had worked hand in hand with the occupiers to execute a popular Jewish teacher. All of this would have put Caiaphas in a difficult position. He needed the support of the Jewish people to maintain his authority, but his actions had likely alienated many of them. At the same time, he needed to keep the Romans happy to stay in power. It was a delicate balancing act, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Despite these challenges, Caiaphas managed to hold on to his position as high priest for several more years, but his influence was waning. The movement he had tried to stamp out was growing stronger by the day, and his own authority was slowly but surely crumbling. In the year 36 CE, about 3 years after Jesus' crucifixion, Caiaphas was finally removed from his position as high priest. The exact reasons for his removal aren't clear, but it's likely that a combination of factors, including his handling of the Jesus situation and changing political tides, contributed to his downfall. For Caiaphas, this must have been a bitter pill to swallow. He had devoted his life to climbing to the top of the religious and political hierarchy, only to see it all slip away. As he stepped down from his role, he must have wondered, had he made the right decision? Could things have turned out differently if he had handled the situation with Jesus in another way? But even as Caiaphas faded from power, the consequences of his actions continued to unfold. The movement he had tried to suppress was spreading beyond Jerusalem, beyond Judea, to the wider Roman world. What thoughts must have gone through Caiaphas's mind as he watched these events unfold, and what became of him after he left his position as high priest? The legacy of Caiaphas, historical impact, and archaeological findings. In the centuries following Caiaphas's time as high priest, his name became forever linked with the trial and crucifixion of Jesus. One of the most exciting archaeological discoveries related to Caiaphas came in 1990. In a burial cave in the Peace Forest area of Jerusalem, archaeologists uncovered an ossuary, a limestone bone box, with a remarkable inscription. Carved into the side were the words, "Joseph, son of Caiaphas," believed to refer to the very Caiaphas mentioned in the New Testament. This find was groundbreaking. For the first time, we had physical evidence directly linked to the high priest who played such a crucial role in Jesus' trial. The ossuary, dated to the 1st century CE, contained the bones of a 60-year-old man, along with those of several younger individuals, likely family members. The discovery of the Caiaphas ossuary sparked intense interest among archaeologists and biblical scholars. It was subjected to rigorous testing and analysis to confirm its authenticity. The Israel Antiquities Authority declared it genuine, though as with many archaeological finds, some scholars have raised questions about its provenance. But what does this discovery tell us about Caiaphas? For one, it confirms that he was a real historical figure, not just a character in religious texts. The elaborate nature of the ossuary also speaks to Caiaphas's high status in Jerusalem society. The bone box was ornately decorated, with intricate floral designs carved into its surface, indicating that it belonged to a wealthy and influential family. The ossuary also provides insights into burial practices of the time. The use of ossuaries was common among wealthy Jews in the 1st century CE. Bodies would first be laid in a tomb. After about a year, when only bones remained, they would be collected and placed in an ossuary. This practice reflects beliefs about the afterlife and the importance of proper burial in Jewish tradition. Another important archaeological find related to Caiaphas is the ancient steps leading to the house of Caiaphas on Mount Zion. These steps, uncovered by archaeologists, are believed to be the very ones Jesus would have climbed when he was brought to Caiaphas for questioning. Walking these steps today gives visitors a tangible connection to those dramatic events described in the Gospels. The site, now known as the Church of St. Peter in Gallicantu, has been a place of pilgrimage for centuries. Excavations have revealed a complex of ruins dating back to the 1st century, including what may have been a guard room and even a dungeon. While we can't be certain that this was indeed Caiaphas's house, the archaeological evidence suggests it was the residence of a person of high status during the time of Jesus. Beyond these physical artifacts, we can learn about Caiaphas from historical writings. The Jewish historian Josephus mentions Caiaphas several times in his works, confirming his tenure as high priest from 18 to 36 CE. Josephus provides valuable context about the political climate of the time, helping us understand the pressures and challenges Caiaphas would have faced. In his work, Antiquities of the Jews, Josephus describes how Caiaphas was appointed high priest by the Roman prefect Valerius Gratus, predecessor to Pontius Pilate. This appointment underscores the complex relationship between Jewish religious authorities and Roman political power. High priests were no longer chosen solely based on religious qualifications, but also on their ability to maintain order and cooperate with Roman authorities. Josephus also mentions Caiaphas's removal from office in 36 CE by the Syrian governor Vitellius. This event coincided with the recall of Pontius Pilate to Rome, suggesting a significant shift in Roman policy towards Judea at that time. The fact that Caiaphas held his position for 18 years, an unusually long tenure for a high priest in that era, indicates his skill in navigating the treacherous political waters of his time. The New Testament, particularly the Gospels and the Book of Acts, provides another source of information about Caiaphas, albeit from a distinctly Christian perspective. These accounts portray Caiaphas as a key figure in the plot against Jesus, presiding over his trial and pushing for his crucifixion. While these texts are not considered unbiased historical documents, they offer valuable insights into how early Christians viewed Caiaphas and the religious establishment he represented. One of the most famous quotes attributed to Caiaphas comes from the Gospel of John, where he says, "It is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish." This statement has been interpreted in various ways by theologians and historians. Some see it as a cold political calculation, while others view it as an unwitting prophecy about Jesus' sacrificial death. But Caiaphas's legacy extends far beyond these archaeological and historical records. His actions, as described in the New Testament, have been the subject of theological discussions and debates for centuries. Christian traditions have often portrayed Caiaphas as a villain, the man who condemned Jesus to death. However, some scholars argue for a more nuanced view, seeing Caiaphas as a political pragmatist caught between the demands of his faith, his people, and the Roman occupiers. In Jewish history, Caiaphas is often viewed more neutrally. He's seen as one in a line of high priests who had to navigate the difficult waters of Roman occupation. Some Jewish scholars have pointed out that Caiaphas's long tenure as high priest suggests he was skilled at maintaining stability in a turbulent period. This was no small feat, given the constant threat of rebellion and the delicate balance of power between Jewish authorities and Roman rulers. To understand Caiaphas fully, we must consider the world he lived in. First-century Judea was a powder keg of political and religious tensions. The Jewish people chafed under Roman rule, and messianic expectations were running high. Various Jewish sects, Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and others, competed for influence. As high priest and head of the Sanhedrin, Caiaphas had to manage these internal divisions while also keeping the peace with Rome. Archaeological excavations have provided a wealth of information about daily life in Jerusalem during Caiaphas's time. The city was undergoing significant expansion and renovation under Herod the Great and his successors. The temple, the center of Jewish religious life, was a massive complex that dominated the city skyline. Recent excavations in the city of David and around the Temple Mount have uncovered streets, houses, and ritual baths, also called mikveh, that Caiaphas and his contemporaries would have known. The story of Caiaphas has also had a significant impact on art and literature throughout history. He appears as a character in countless paintings, plays, and films depicting the life of Jesus. These portrayals have shaped popular perceptions of Caiaphas, often emphasizing his role in Jesus' condemnation. From medieval passion plays to modern cinema, Caiaphas has been depicted in various ways, sometimes as a one-dimensional villain, other times as a more complex figure torn between duty and conscience. In more recent times, Caiaphas has become a subject of interest for historians and archaeologists, studying the political and religious landscape of first-century Judea. By examining Caiaphas's role and actions, scholars have gained valuable insights into the complex relationship between Jewish religious authorities and Roman political power during this pivotal time in history. The legacy of Caiaphas serves as a reminder of how a single historical figure can have a profound and lasting impact. His story intersects with one of the most significant events in religious history and continues to fascinate scholars and lay people alike. The ongoing archaeological work in Jerusalem and the surrounding areas promises to shed even more light on Caiaphas and his world in the years to come. One area of ongoing research is the study of ancient Jewish priestly families. Genetic studies of modern populations claiming descent from the ancient priesthood, those with the Cohen surname, have revealed a common Y chromosome haplotype, suggesting a shared ancestry dating back to ancient times. While we can't directly link this to Caiaphas, it provides intriguing possibilities for understanding the priestly lineages of his era. Another avenue of research is the study of ancient texts beyond the Bible and Josephus. The Dead Sea Scrolls, for instance, provide valuable insights into the diverse religious landscape of first-century Judaism. While they don't mention Caiaphas directly, they help us understand the theological debates and power struggles that would have shaped his world. But questions still remain. How accurately do the gospel accounts portray Caiaphas's role in Jesus' trial? What more might archaeological discoveries reveal about his life and times? And how should we interpret Caiaphas's actions in light of the political and religious pressures he faced? As we continue to uncover new evidence and re-examine old sources, our understanding of Caiaphas and his era continues to evolve. His story reminds us of the complex interplay between religion and politics, and the profound impact that decisions made in one moment can have on the course of history. Whether viewed as a villain, a pragmatist, or simply a man caught in extraordinary circumstances, Caiaphas remains a figure of enduring historical and theological significance. What do you think about Caiaphas? Was he a villain, a pragmatic leader caught in a difficult situation, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the life and legacy of Caiaphas, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you want to stay up to date with our latest videos, make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. We've got plenty more stories coming your way.